And then I'm just going to do a quick round of introductions as to who you see on screen. So who you see on screen is RB Harrison, who is a member of the CTF board and also our treasurer and his family, Susan and Brian. You see our Chief Executive Officer, Annette Bacher, our Chief Scientific and Impact Officer, John Puzis, Monica Sohn, our Chief Growth Officer, Marco Nievo, our Chief Scientific Officer in Europe, Derek Nimchowski, our Managing Director for CTF Europe, Irene Morgenstern, our Director of Preclinical Initiatives at Children's Tumor Foundation. So we've got the whole team here. And then our special guest, thank you for being here, Dr. Scott Plotkin, who many of you probably know, and he'll be here as well to talk about a few things and also answer any questions you may have. So with that, I'm going to turn it right over to RB and the Harrison family. And thank you, RB.
All right, thanks, Simon. Like many families on this call, we are here because NF2 is personal. Our son Brian, to my left here, was diagnosed when he was young, and we know what it feels like to live with NF2. The scans, the surgeries, the decisions, the waiting, and the constant stress about what is coming next. As Simon said, I'm a member of the board as well as the executive committee, and I get a bird's eye view into what CTF is doing. That's part of why I wanted to help open the call with Susan and Brian. We are here to say one treatment is not going to solve NF2. We know better than that. That's why we believe in CTF's portfolio approach that is not one home run shot that's going to get everything fixed. It's a near-term, mid-term, long-term work, many shots on goal, all aimed at giving NF2 patients more options. We are here because we believe CTF is building a professional, serious, connected system needed to get treatments to patients faster. We see the team, we see the science, we see the work that is happening to connect researchers, doctors, companies, trials, and families. And we want the NF2 community to know that CTF is all in for NF2 in its focus, in its investments, and in its actions. Today is about providing a clear progress look. What is happening now, what is coming next, and how CTF is driving NF2 treatments forward.
Everyone on this call is affected by NF2 in some ways. You're a patient, a parent, a family member, a clinician, researcher, someone who just cares deeply about this community. In my case, I'm the mother who 10 years ago had a pediatrician tell me that my son had a tumor the size of a lime on his brainstem. Families want and need clear information. We want to know what's real. Sorry if I start crying. We want to know what's advancing, what's still early, and what's going to make a difference for our loved ones. And that's why we believe in CTF. The work is complicated. It takes scientists, doctors, staff, partners, a real infrastructure to keep things moving. It keeps people who know how to deal with academic labs, with pharma, with trial sites, and with our families. We've seen that in CTF. We've seen the commitment, we've seen the persistence, and we've seen progress, which is the most important. And Brian can obviously speak to that in a very personal way.
Hi, super happy to be here. As mentioned previously, I was diagnosed with NF when I was 10. Since then, I've had a brain tumor. I've had, I think, about 8 surgeries, countless MRIs, numerous doctor's appointments, and a ton of difficult medical decisions. For the longest time, NF really has felt like something that's very reactive. Never really had any opportunity to be proactive. Never really had any solutions. Never had anything to really do anything. Just monitoring, MRIs, and it's been very hard to deal with that. 6 years ago, I did get involved with CTF's platform clinical trial, and that's where I was first introduced to brigatinib, which has been a real game changer for somebody like me. It's caused my tumor growth to slow by over 80%, which that has just radically altered my entire life view. It's changed my entire perspective on what my future can even be. I just finished my undergraduate career at Syracuse, and I'm hoping that I can attend law school in the fall. And all of that is because of brigatinib. I know that no treatment is truly the answer for everybody, but I know what it means to go from having no possibilities to having something. And that is why this work matters.
Thanks, Brian. And that's the real reason we're here in this town hall. Families want to know what is happening now, what is coming next, and how CTF is the organization that will keep pushing this forward and give us hope. Can you take us through the NF2 engine that CTF has built?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much. And story like Brian and the Harrison family are the stories that get all of us as a team at CTF out of bed and never give up to find solutions. So if I would have NF2, what I would want to know is what you're cooking up in the lab is really cute, but what is coming to the clinic soon? So I wanted to give you one historic example, which is really an example of how we have built that engine. So in 2014, I was receiving a lot of phone calls from parents who said, we don't know which drugs we should give to our kids because sometimes publications say the drug works, sometimes the drug doesn't work. The other one says sometimes yes, sometimes yes. So we put out a request for proposals to the research community and said, can you figure that out? Can we get a one answer? This drug works and this drug doesn't work. And we had a fantastic proposal from a team with Scott Plotkin, Jayshree Blakely, Wade Clapp, and Jim Gazella, who put out a global team, 12 academic centers worldwide. We had a believer who was Tracy Galloway as a patient representative, but also as one of the early investors in this. And that whole thing was called Synodos. And I always describe to donors Synodos as a football team. If you have a football team, they're not all quarterbacks. Those, by the way, those are the only ones that I know. They don't all run wildly around and hoping that they will make goals. They strategize together. They are people that are from all over the world, not from one city, but from all over the world. So that is what we built. Everybody in the room, everybody committed to make it happen, very different expertise, strategizing together, share the data together, and then creating this incredible engine where now we could screen drugs. Screen means seeing which drug is selected to go into clinical trials. So together with another partner, the National Center for Advancing Translational Science, NCATS, they also helped us screen, and they said, we will do this screen on 3,000 drugs. And there was one drug that came back, which was brigatinib. And everybody was, this is so weird, brigatinib can never work in NF2. So what happened then is we invested in the analysis and trying to understand the mechanism. And what came back was a big surprise. There was a mechanism that it was hitting in NF2 cells, which were actually relevant to NF2. So anyhow, that led to beautiful publications. But as you know, as CTF and honestly, as an NF community, we don't want to stop at the publication, right? We're like, publications are fine because that's reputation building and validation that we're doing the right thing, which is really important. But then we're like, okay, how are we going to bring this now to clinical trials? And then our dear friend Scott Plotkin designed what is called platform basket trial. And it sounds very complicated, but in fact, the simplest way to explain it is that you can now look at the drug at multiple manifestations, vestibular schwannoma, non-vestibular schwannoma, meningioma, and ependymoma at the same time. And that the sites that are running the clinical trials, they sign up right away and they stay with the team for the next 10 years. So this means that if you are a company and you have a drug, what you need to do is write the part about the drug and plug it into that platform basket trial. So that was a genius idea of Scott. CTF decided to co-fund that with Takeda, who was in fact the drug owner of brigatinib. And here we are now. This drug is now, 2 weeks ago, approved by what is called NCCN, which in fact is a complicated term to say this drug is now in the standard of care guidelines for oncologists, that they are like, we have an NF2 patient, they look at that document and brigatinib is in there. So that I think is a huge win. That wouldn't have happened without CTF, wouldn't have happened with these incredible believers from both the research, the clinical, and the patient communities. So now what? we have this one win. We're super excited. Scott, I'm sure, can maybe talk for a minute about the other drugs that have gone through this, because in fact, normally you do one trial, then you build a whole new infrastructure, you test another drug and another drug and another drug. It's a very sequential thing. With this platform basket trial, it's like click, click, click. And we have already looked at multiple drugs in the platform basket trial in the past couple of years. So now what? The most important message of this entire webinar is that you walk away and understand that drug discovery is a team sport. You cannot do drug discovery alone because you need a whole team of experts with very diverse backgrounds in order to make this happen. And that is what we have built at CTF. So we have Marco, who is a chemist by training and a patent attorney. He is in fact the drug scout. He will go through the entire literature and make sure that we're selecting the drugs that have the highest probability of success and that then can be proposed to our clinical community and preclinical community and say, is there anything in here that you guys like? Sometimes drugs always come from the companies or come from our research community, right? So it's never a pipeline in one direction. It comes from all over, right? The second person here on screen is Irene Morgenstern, who has a lot of experience. She's a PhD. She has a lot of experience, worked for a contract research organization, drug selection company. It's a whole mouthful, but she is running our drug selection empire, and she will make sure that if drugs are valuable for lung cancer, she will make sure that we make sure that they're tested before they go into the patients for NF, for any NF, NF2, NF1. She has this whole panel of models that she has or is looking at. And then John just joined us a little bit over 3 months already.
4 months.
4 months, look at that. John is, I would say, if I would have to summarize John is our deal maker. He will make sure that we get the right models in the right place, that we are talking to companies, that if there is certain drugs that we are looking at and that may require a spin out, there John and I are working on that together. But he makes sure, and he has, by the way, 20 plus years experience in tech transfer. So really making sure, and not in a small school at Yale University. So he really knows how to deal with the academic centers and really make sure that the whole engine keeps working. And then Derek comes into the mix. Derek is a clinician by training. Besides being the managing director of CTF Europe, he is also kind of coordinating the whole clinical operation. So this engine is important. The engine is delivering. And what I want to do now is maybe quickly walk you through what are you guys actually doing, right? This is all cool and nice. I just want to throw out a quick thing. Vanessa and Simon are working on making sure that we get this presented in English together with, especially with Monica. It's like no jargon. So can we throw on the slide? Okay, so this is a busy slide, but we are busy. So the way Vanessa smartly organized this is to say, okay, what is happening in clinical research? What is approaching the clinic? What is approaching the clinic in the gene therapy and immunotherapy? What are the drug testing models that we already have that Irene is managing? And what is the emergent research that is really cool and may move up to the clinical research? And this is all funded by CTF. So as you know, there is the brigatinib, I already mentioned that, the platform basket trial, which is exactly that trial that Scott is running, which is, just think about it, it's an efficient trial. Then the next one are all those names that nobody can say, but it's the third drug that goes into that platform basket trial. Then there is an antiretroviral, which is in fact a drug that is approved for AIDS and that is now repurposed for NF2, and that's a trial that we're running in England. PRGN002 is a trial that is running in South Korea. We're looking at quality of life tools. We're looking at long-term outcomes, which is a study that we're funding through the NF Clinical Trials Consortium, which is another consortium. And then we're looking at biomarker validation for patients with vestibular schwannomas. When it comes to what is approaching the clinic, We are looking at AI, and there is a group in Florida who is looking at AI to see if there is any other potential drugs that could be extracted using AI technologies. We are looking at multi-drug resistance, completely another class of therapies, and another one and another one. So we're in fact looking at different mechanisms to say, okay, if we hit these NF2 tumors from here and from here and from here and from here and from here, maybe we will be able to really eradicate them. Then John is going to talk later about our gene therapy efforts, mRNA, CRISPR, OMV, a lot of important jargon, but I'm sure that everybody since COVID has heard about mRNA, so which was the COVID vaccine. CRISPR is this little baby KJ, I think it was, that was cured by CRISPR. So we're looking at everything. And then there's a lot of models that Irene is having or making, or having in fact agreements with the academic institutions to be able to use them for drug testing, because this is what I would call a public-private partnership. And then there is, of course, a whole slew of emerging research. The importance of this slide to walk away with is that we are real investors. We're building diversified portfolios. We're not betting on one horse. We're betting, as you can see, on many horses. And we're busy doing that, but it really gives us the possibility to do what everybody says, multiple goals on shot, right? So multiple shots on goal. I keep missing that. This is where I stand. This is all the things that we have done so far. And now I'm going to hand it off to John, who is going to go a little bit more into the engine, into the under the hood. But I hope you see that the engine is ready. The engine can run, but we will need to keep fundraising to keep the gas into the engine, right? Which are all the drugs that will actually advance treatments for NF2. John, I'm going to hand it over for you to get under the hood.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Annette. As Annette mentioned, I just joined CTF recently as Chief Scientific and Impact Officer, and have had a long career in building partnerships between academia, drug companies, biotechs, venture investors, and contract research organizations. And what we're doing here, our engine involves all of those. So to orient everyone, as Annette said, drug discovery and drug development is a team sport. It has been likened to putting a person on the moon. It costs $1 billion or more, and potentially a decade or more to take a drug from its initial discovery through all the preclinical testing, the clinical trials, and finally release on the market. It starts with identification of a drug target, that is a protein that is linked to or causes the disease. Then one can design various tests to screen compounds, drugs, potential drugs against that target. That can start with 1 million or more compounds. And then you have a number of hits. These are the first 100 or so that show activity. You filter that down to a lead molecule. This is still before it ever goes into the clinic. You do some studies to take it into an IND. That's the document that's submitted to the FDA to allow one to do a clinical trial. Then you do a series of clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. That's where it starts to get very expensive. And then hopefully you get an approval from the FDA to market the drug. So the process is acting as a filter. You're starting with many, many different kinds of molecules, narrowing it down to 1 or 2 that you would take into the clinical trials. What we are doing is building an integrated system that we hope will reduce the friction, the time, and the risk across that entire pathway from the idea, the initial hypothesis, to the patient. One of the biggest barriers in all of this is access. And for rare disease, that's particularly important to get the right models to test the drug in before you go into a clinical trial, the right expertise, the right partners, whether it's biotech or academia, the right clinical trial network, a patient population that can be recruited into the clinical trial, and companies that have drugs that are potentially worth testing. Those companies don't want to spend a decade, many, many years negotiating contracts with various academic institutions, with contract research organizations to figure out what models should we test it in, who are the experts. We're doing that work in advance for them. We're trying to reduce those barriers, get those contracts and the models in place in advance so that a company can put in a molecule and it's essentially a turnkey operation. That is our preclinical hub. Irene Morgenstern will tell you a little bit more about that later. This is where our infrastructure matters. We have expertise, we have relationships that are built with these companies, with the academic labs, and have the people in place to push this along at every step. That's the team of experts you see here on this call. So rather than talk more about this in the abstract, I'm going to turn it over to Derek, who will talk more about clinical trials, about brigatinib, and what's coming down the pipeline next. Derek?
Yes, thank you, John. I'm Darek Adamczewski. I'm leading CTF's European operations and globally clinical operations. And good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. So I want to talk you through what's actually moving right now in NF clinical research at the CTF, not the distant projects, but projects that are really active, clinically relevant, changing the direction of the field. So as you will see on the slide here, it's quite busy. So that is good news, because a few years ago only, this slide would only have 2 or 3 boxes. And today we have real clinical pipeline already. So the 3 most important messages here are these. First, brigatinib, that has moved from a clinical trial into guideline-supported patient access. Second, the Intuit NF2 platform trial. It's our tool, thanks to which we can move faster. And the third is next major step in the new trial arm, raftanlimab and bevacizumab, promising combination study expected to start recruiting this year. Behind all of this is Scott Plotkin, who will also be able to add a few words later. So let me start with the real headline, brigatinib. It was originally developed for a type of lung cancer, but through our platform trial, it was tested in patients with NF2 progressive tumors. And although it was not a cure, we should be honest about it, it showed meaningful benefit for patients. Some tumors shrank, some patients had hearing or pain benefits. So importantly, the activity was seen across tumor types, not only in vestibular schwannomas. So most important point is this: a positive trial is not the same as patient access. You know the frustration of hearing that something looks promising, is promising, only to find that it's not available, not reimbursed, not recognized by health systems. This is why NCCN guidelines, it's National Comprehensive Cancer Networks, inclusion in the guidelines matters so much. Brigatinib is now included in the guidelines. That means it is a recommended treatment option for NF2 schwannomatosis. Shortly speaking, that gives doctors recognized clinical basis to discuss and prescribe it. It gives patients and families something concrete to point to. It gives insurers and health systems stronger justification for access. To be precise, it's not the same as FDA or EMA approval specifically for NF2 schwannomatosis. It means that in Europe, access will still depend on each country's system, but it changes the conversation. We are no longer talking about only publication or conference abstract. We are talking about treatment option with guideline backing. That is the goal of CTF clinical research, not only to publish papers, but to move evidence towards access. Annette already explained how platform basket trial works, because this is how brigatinib got there. So to remind you, it allows us to test multiple treatments under one shared structure. We cannot afford slow one-by-one trial development. So arm 1 was brigatinib, arm 2 was neratinib, and we know that not every arm will become a treatment option, but every arm teaches us something, teaches us how faster and stronger assess the next candidates. So that's the right infrastructure for rare disease. And this brings me to next major development, which is new trial of retifanlimab and bevacizumab. This is a phase 2 trial testing two drugs together, which we call combination. And many families know bevacizumab, called Avastin. It targets blood vessel signals that feed the tumor. And in some NF2 patients, it has helped with vestibular schwannomas and with hearing. But it does not work for everyone, and it does not work forever. Retifanlimab is something different. It's an immunotherapy. More specifically, it's a drug designed to help release a brake on the immune system, so immune cells may respond more effectively to tumor cells. The idea behind the combination is simple. We bring two mechanisms, we target one problem. So bevacizumab works on the tumor feeding blood vessel environment, retifanlimab works on immune response. NF tumors are very complex biologically, so it's very reasonable to test whether the combination will produce stronger or longer benefit than single approach. This is still a research, so we don't want to overpromise. The trial is being done precisely because we need to know whether the combination is safe enough, active enough, but it's a serious rational next step, and it's expected to begin recruiting this year as sites and approvals are activated. So please do not assume that every patient will be eligible. Do not start or change treatment outside expert care, but follow CTF updates because this is one of the most important upcoming NF2 studies. I will mention briefly another boxes in the slide. So antiretroviral repurposing trial is looking at HIV drugs in NF2-related tumors. So repurposing existing drugs can sometimes shorten the path from idea to real clinical testing. PRGN01, also called Trinumine, is a CTF-supported early phase of clinical trials in Korea. So that shows that we are chasing every opportunity everywhere. So the promising technology, wherever it comes from, it's on our radar, and we support its development. The other projects support the whole clinical pipeline. So we are developing quality of life tools because of patients care not only about tumor size, so not only tumor shrinkage is important, but also hearing, balance, pain, fatigue, independence, school, work, daily life. So these are the parameters we need to measure responsibly in a responsible way. We are also validating biomarkers because the future should not be let's try a drug and hope it works, but the future should be which patient, which tumor, which biology, which treatment. So we need to be precise. We need to identify precise biomarkers. We focus also on long-term outcome studies because what happens after trial also matters. And looking just ahead, we are also looking at VEGFR vaccine, the approach that trains the patient's own immune system to attack the blood vessel signals that schwannomas rely on to grow. Scott will share probably more details later today. So where are we going in CTF, in NF2 schwannomatosis research? We are moving from disease with almost no treatment options towards a coordinated pipeline. One drug now in guidelines, new combination trial starting, global early stage programs starting, better patient-centered outcomes, biomarkers to make treatment smarter. Brigatinib proves that this path can work. Retifanlimab plus bevacizumab is the next major step. The broader pipeline is how we keep going. No miracles, no false promises, real structured, evidence-driven progress. We design it for patients, not for publications. Thank you so much, and over to Irene.
Thank you, Derek. Guess I can't really see you, but nice to be here with everyone. I'm Irene Morgenstern, and I lead the preclinical initiatives. So meaning that most of the things that are happening before they touch a patient or the clinic. So while Derek, Annette, and John have just talked about some of the clinical updates, which are the closest to the having real patient impact, we also need to consider our entire pipeline and how we fill it with our various funded programs. We don't have enough time to cover everything. As you can see, the board is full and there's quite a bit going on, and all of it is moving towards the clinic. But I will focus in on just a few interesting initiatives. We can always answer questions at the end about anything that piques your interest on this slide. So I'll start first. So in order to continue feeding the pipeline, this first project, it is the validation of AI predicted drug candidates for schwannomas. This is a study being conducted at the University of Central Florida. And again, in order to feed the pipeline, this specific project uses artificial intelligence, AI, to help identify new treatment options for NF2-related schwannomatosis, much faster than traditional drug discovery approaches. So instead of starting from scratch and trying to invent a new drug entirely, which can take, as John mentioned, many years, an enormous amount of money, this group is looking at medicines that are already approved for another disease, another indication, and asking whether they could also help patients with NF2-related schwannomatosis. This approach uses a machine learning platform that's already built and available. It's called TXGNN. That is not relevant, but just in case somebody on the call is interested. And the team identified nearly 200 existing drugs that may have potential against schwannomas. Through various filters, we narrowed that list down to 25. And now the lab is currently testing those in preclinical models in the laboratory to see which ones can slow or stop tumor cell growth while sparing healthy cells. And the most promising candidates will then be tested directly in tumor cells grown from patients with NF2 schwannomatosis. From there, the group will study how the best performing drugs work at the molecular level. So trying to understand the pathways, the signals that are allowing the tumor to grow and survive. If we can understand that, we can try to find a way to stop it or slow it at least. And what makes this especially exciting is that we're combining AI with patient-derived tumor models to create a much faster and more targeted path towards the clinic. I will also go a little bit into another interesting project, and that is Dr. Leju's work at Mass General Hospital. And this is, again, one of these combination approaches that Derek also was talking about, slightly different. And this is the combination of belzutifan with belzutifan. And so I don't have to tell this audience, but one of the biggest challenges for people living with NF2 schwannomatosis is that tumors, the vestibular schwannomas, can lead to progressive hearing loss, balance problems, and the need for repeated interventions. So while the drug that we just heard about, Avastin, has helped some patients by slowing tumor growth and preserving hearing, it doesn't work for everyone. And in some patients, the tumors eventually become resistant to the treatment, while other patients may stop therapy altogether because of side effects. So there's a clear need or gap here that this project is addressing. This project is testing whether the combination, again, of bevacizumab and another drug called belzutifan could provide a more effective approach for patients with vestibular schwannomas. Just to note that belzutifan is an oral medication. It's already approved for another disease. These are kidney tumors. And it works by blocking a pathway that tumors use to adapt and survive under stressful conditions. Specifically, unfortunately, tumors grow or found a way to grow in an environment with low oxygen levels. And the research team discovered that this pathway is especially important and active in vestibular schwannomas associated with hearing loss. So this could be an interesting target to be part of a combination therapy or alone. And if I would just kind of get to what's happening now, in the laboratory in this institution under Dr. Lejeune, they're using a mouse model that mimics the disease, where you can look at the pathways and also hearing loss, very similar to what's seen in patients. And they see that belzutifan slowed tumor growth and helped preserve hearing function. And it was well tolerated. That means that, we have to make sure the animals can tolerate the medicine before we give it to the patient. So this is good news. And the team then tested whether if combining belzutifan with or Avastin, just to say it simply, could work even better together. And very early findings, this is all way before the clinic, they suggest that combination therapies may provide a stronger protection against tumor-related hearing loss. If these results continue to hold true, there's still quite a bit that has to be done. It could, be a new treatment therapy or strategy for NF2 patients, especially those whose tumors no longer respond to the current therapies. So very exciting, but very early on in the preclinical pipeline currently. I will, if I have another minute, jump quickly to the preclinical hub. John already mentioned that the preclinical hub we think about as a filtering system. So it helps us identify which potential therapies are most likely to succeed before they ever reach the patients. And if we have the right screening models or the right filters, we can very quickly narrow down many hundreds, maybe thousands of compounds just to the ones that are most promising. This is critical because testing everything is not feasible. So we need to make sure that we're focused on the right approaches. And the problem through the preclinical hub that we're talking about here is access, right? So, how do we centralize these screening tools, and how do we make them available for companies or researchers to use them to filter their own compounds? So I can mention briefly one or two achievements within the preclinical hub. One example is our stem cell platform that we are building. These are iPSCs, and these are patient-derived cells that can be turned into specific cell types affected in the disease. So it could be a nerve cell, for example. I'm happy to report that we were able to collect our first patient sample, and it is currently with our vendor. We have an expert vendor we work with that they will be making these stem cells, which then can be used and made into nerve cells. And then we can use those nerve cells to set up a drug screening test or filter, if we were to call it, and make it available. So our goal is to have several lines available to cover the variability in genetics representative of patients. So stay tuned for more information and potential opportunities to get involved. And with regards to mouse models, right? So we need to test the therapies in both cells in the laboratory and mice. We have a partnership in place with Plymouth University to screen drugs using their cell and mouse models. And we are also working on making our own NF2 genetic mouse model and making it accessible for drug screening. You can see on the screen that there's another part of the pipeline. So it's not only about the targets and treatments, gene therapy and drug screening models, but there's an early part to the pipeline, the emerging research. I will probably pause here and maybe hand it over. If there's time, I'll come back and talk about a few items in the emerging section. So I'm going to hand it over to John to talk about some of our gene therapy initiatives.
Thanks, Irene. I'm going to make this very brief just because we have our guest of honor, Scott Plotkin, here, and he can speak a little bit more about some of the things that could be tested in clinical trials in the next few years in the gene therapy or mRNA therapy space. But one of the things that CTF is supporting, which could be very useful for either NF1 or NF2, is the delivery mechanism that is going to be required for getting a nucleic acid, that's an mRNA or the gene itself, into a cell in order to correct the mutation that is present in those cells and potentially treat or cure the disease. So many of you have probably heard about LNPs. This is a lipid nanoparticle. This is the technology that's part of the COVID vaccine for delivering the mRNA that makes the vaccine into cells. So we are supporting research in a number of labs and also in a biotech startup company to develop novel LNP formulations. With that, I'm going to turn it over quickly to Scott. I know he has to run. So Scott, maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the things that either you or some of your colleagues in the field are planning for gene or mRNA therapy.
Sure. Thank you so much, John. And what a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation to join everyone online. In case it's ever been in doubt, all of the physicians and nurses and rest of the medical teams are so desperate to find new treatments for our families. Just a reminder, it weighs on us so much as well, and we're really trying to do our best to speed this along. Having said that, I've never been more excited than I am now about the future of therapeutics for NF2 related schwannomatosis. There's never been more drugs available through companies, never been more preclinical research, and really never been a better infrastructure than now. I say that understanding that it still takes years to get information about how things work, in people. And just to say this out loud, that's partly because if you go too fast, you can hurt people, and we never want to do that. We don't want to go ahead with medicines that may cause unacceptable side effects and so forth. And we always have this delicate dance of trying to rush things into people and at the same time protecting them. So just be aware that we do this, always trying to figure out the right balance, the best balance to do that. So where are we now? Where are we going? I'm very excited about Arm C of the Intuit study. That is the retifanlimab and bevacizumab, or the ZINS. It's a very interesting name for the first drug, and Avastin for the second drug. Why is it interesting? This trial highlights an important concept that's important now and will continue to be important. And these are the concepts. Number one, we're exploring approved drugs in other conditions, what we call repurposing, like we did with brigatinib, so that we can short circuit decades of research and bring things as quickly as possible. So both of these drugs are repurposed. And that has really allowed us to capitalize or leverage billions of dollars of investment from industry and rapidly bring it to people who have NF2 related schwannomatosis. The second thing is, this will be the first time in our community that we're doing a combination study formally. And it's important because none of us believe yet that one drug is going to cure it all. We'll get to gene therapy in a minute because that is my hope there. But in the current day, we don't think that one medicine will do that. So this will be the first chance to say, does two medicines work better than one medicine? Or is it just more toxic? How are people going to tolerate this? Is it reasonable? And so for everybody who is going to participate in this trial, I thank you in advance for allowing us to work with you to understand, is this something that can help so many thousands of people who have NF2 related schwannomatosis around the world? The third concept is We're trying to optimize Avastin. We know Avastin works. The question is, what should partner with Avastin? Should it be Avastin and drug A, drug B, drug C? And you can see that CTF is investing in finding that optimal partner. That allows us flexibility in terms of dosing, and I hope allows us to deepen the responses, the tumor shrinkage, and the hearing improvements that we see. So I do believe in 5 years, we're going to have combination treatments out there. And I guess the last thing is to really echo what RB said is the community, broadly speaking, is really wants to take many shots on goal, short-term shots, medium shots, long-term shots. And that's the transition to this idea of gene therapy. I have to say it's very disappointing to be a doctor who's in this field and not have gene therapy available to patients yet. It's one of the great disappointments so far of my career, but that doesn't mean we're not working on it. It is a single gene condition, meaning unlike many conditions like high blood pressure or diabetes or some of the immunological conditions, we know what causes NF2, and we know that it's a lack of a functional protein called myelin, and that's the protein that's encoded by the gene NF2. So this is not rocket science, right? I think we now have the tools from the rest of the gene therapy world. Remember, we leverage what happens in other communities. So our goal now is to take the information that's coming from other gene therapies and begin applying it to help treat NF2. And my, of course, deepest wish is to cure it at some point by replacing the defective gene or replacing the defective protein or missing protein. I'm 57 years old. I tell all my patients this. I got, 10 or 15 years. This is what we're working on, is the real cure, we hope, the real significant treatment. There are many, many hurdles. I do feel confident we'll get there. It's going to take a while to find the correct gene replacement. What does that look like? The correct carrier. You heard that John was talking about investing in lipid nanoparticles, which are basically little Trojan horses that carry your gene of interest into a cell. And so I think that what we're going to, and I'll say the last thing is also investing in understanding, why can't our immune systems eradicate these tumors? We know that our immune systems provide surveillance normally for tumors. How can we stimulate our own immune systems to participate with the Avastins, to participate with brigatinib and other medicines to try to make it more effective? So I think you're going to be hearing also more about investments in understanding the immune system. Can we create a tumor vaccine? One, this is a quick aside, but something I feel so devoted to, treating people who have NF2 between the ages of 6 and 25, our younger patients, where it's such an important group before people get symptoms, before they have problems. How do we head it off before they run into trouble? And we think that stimulating the immune system might be one of many ways to do that. So Annette and I and many others have been working on a tumor vaccine that we think could be repurposed for this and has a lot of exciting activity. This is a very complicated regulatory world we live in, and many of the barriers we face are not scientific but regulatory, but we are working on them. And I will just put a plug in. The FDA has, for me, Scott Plotkin has been a wonderful partner. We have been very grateful to the FDA and for the work that CTF has done, helping us work with the FDA. It's not straightforward to work in this field when you have a rare condition, because the FDA also has certain limitations. So I think we have a good infrastructure and we have a good pipeline. And my hope is that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're really going to see a lot of progress. And so without taking any more time, because I know those are other speakers, I think I'll probably stop there.
Thank you, Scott. I know we're going to almost come up on time. Most of the questions have been answered in the chat. We're going to pick up on just one or two before we lose you, Scott. And we are going to, even though the call officially ends at the top of the hour, everyone who can stay on from the CTF team is going to stay on. So if there are more questions, we'll keep going. We also recognize that we announced that this would be a 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. call. So for anyone who needs to leave at 1, you can leave. We are recording the entire thing. It will be available on YouTube afterwards. So if you miss anything after the 1 p.m. hour, we'll certainly make it available. I do encourage everyone to, because we're not going to be able to do all 10 questions now in the next few minutes. If you look at the answers that Scott and John have been answering in the Q&A, we'll capture those and make those available on our website as well in connection to the video. But I do want to, before we lose you, Scott, there's a question here about supplements, AI predicted supplement candidates, and nutraceuticals. Do you mind? Would you be able to answer that?
I can't answer it. I mean, I will answer the question, but unfortunately, we at my program have not been studying supplements, and so therefore I don't feel that I'm personally well equipped to answer it. I know there's a lot of interest at different sites, but I don't know enough to be helpful on this one. So maybe I would open up if anyone else knows on the panel about research on this area.
Maybe just a general thing on supplements is that one of the things that we have learned over the years with supplements is that there's a huge quality difference between the different supplements. And you hear that we have this olive oil, and that is now for NF1, very high phenolic olive oil that can be beneficial for patients with NF1. But then people go and buy their olive oil on Amazon, and then of course it doesn't work, and then they say it doesn't work. So I think one of the big things that one day we would love to invest in also is to say, what if we do real clinical trials with these supplements, with high quality, high grade supplements that we control, and say, you cannot buy this on whatever, at Walgreens. You need to have this very specific supplement that you have to buy. It's more expensive, but if you want to see benefit. So I think that has been a little bit the challenge with supplements. And then the other thing is that I think in the long run, this should be the role of nonprofits, because nobody makes money on supplements. So, or limited, let's say. So it's something that investors will probably not invest in. So this is something we are looking into. But as you can see, we have so many other things cooking with faster path to the clinic that we haven't really have deep delve into that. Unless, Kate, you have heard other things as our patient connector and clinician connector.
No,
Kate, you're mute.
sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was muted. I apologize. Yeah, no, I actually completely agree with everything you said, Annette. I think the piece of information I always share with any family is that anytime you're considering a supplement, you need to talk to your NF doctor about it. Not because they should yell at you or tell you not to take it, but because they need to understand the complete picture of anything that you or your child is taking, no matter how harmless it might seem, because you're really important, the most important part of you or your child's healthcare team. And so having those honest conversations with your team is essential.
Since we've got Kate here, Kate is our VP of Patient Impact Research and Engagement. Kate is the hardest working person at CTF. Let's just say that right now. But Kate is also, among her many hats, in charge of the NF registry, which was just relaunched this week. Can we take a minute, Kate? Would you mind talking to us? Yeah, sorry.
Simon, can I go back 1 second?
Oh, yeah, no, please go ahead.
Yeah, because there were some questions that were asked about certain like Santo, for example, and all those kind of things. Some of these we are waiting for the conference to come together and have these real conversations between researchers, and that just really shows also the importance of our NF conference. That is not just a coffee show, right? This is really where researchers meet, where we will understand where people are, what the future will look like, and that is in fact a huge gathering of everybody who cares about NF to come together and discuss about the future. And so we will have answers to some of these questions after our conference. Sorry, going back to you, Scott.
No, it's great. No, perfect. Like I said, I know we're at time in 2 minutes. We're going to keep going. For anyone who needs to leave, we will be making this recording available. But if you can stay with us. Please feel free to keep asking questions. We're going to give Kate the floor for a few minutes to talk about the registry and its importance, particularly with NF2 and all forms of schwannomatosis.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll try to keep it brief, but the NF registry was initially launched in 2012. So many of you may have heard of it or been familiar with it, or maybe you think, gosh, I thought I maybe joined that at some point, but I don't remember. We recently migrated all of that data in a highly secure, careful fashion to a new platform that's being hosted by the National Organization for Rare Disease, which is NORD, is what we call it. Their I Am Rare platform is incredibly agile and user-friendly. They built it specifically for patient-entered registries in the rare disease community. And so it really meets all of our needs as a community and as a foundation. The point of the registry is to give patients and caregivers and care partners the opportunity to participate in this research, which is the NF registry, in sharing your medical information and answering health surveys. You are contributing to the body of knowledge, which is incredibly important as we think about how does living with NF2 related schwannomatosis affect each person? Why does each person's course often look different than another person? There are these big questions that are a lot easier to answer if you have a lot of data. And so we go directly to the community and we say, you know best how this is impacting you and what this means for your life. And so we're asking and giving you the opportunity to share that information in a secure fashion. This is an IRB approved, HIPAA compliant, GDPR compliant, very safe and secure platform. It also gives you the opportunity to receive emails. You can opt in to receive what you're interested in. So you never have to hear from us about anything that you don't want to. But the most important communication we send is opportunities to participate in research and clinical trials. And so this becomes a tool that our research community can also use to safely and securely reach out to the patient and caregiver community and invite them to participate in research that's happening all over the country and all over the world. It is an international database, and we are working hard to engage not only the patient and caregiver, but also the research community around the globe. So you should check it out, and we would love for you to consider joining.
And Kate, as you may have seen in the Q&A, some folks who had some questions about specific, more medical, personal questions. Kate can't answer everything, but she can help guide you in the right direction. So I think Kate was going to type in her email address when she was a minute, and feel free to reach out to her, or you can always reach out to info@ctf.org, and we'll get that message to anyone on this call. Are there any other questions that are on people's minds? You've got the whole team here, so we're anxious to hear any other thoughts that people may have. Just going to give it a minute. Okay. Annette, maybe I'll turn it up. Is there another one? Well, Scott has left. I'm wondering if anyone can answer this. I know I can, but I shouldn't, based on what I know. The question is, can we share tumor control of brigatinib after long-term use? Does it still shrink tumor growth, or does it keep them stable from not growing?
The question is, what is long, right? So we have started the clinical trial with brigatinib in, I want to say 2021. So we're now 5 years in. So the question is, what is long compared to long, right? So
Yeah.
That's the big, right? Derek, maybe you're oh, sorry, John, Derek.
So
I was going to say,
sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I think Dr. Plotkin is submitting some of their data for publication soon,
Yep.
So we should have some answers, but I'm not sure if it would address that specific question.
Yeah, so it's ongoing observation after the trial. So the more time, the more answers. But yeah, it's something that is being under observation all the time.
But it's an extremely important question, and that in fact justifies why CTF has invested so immediately into long-term follow-up of drug testing. Because one of the challenges that we had, as we all know, is that CDMRP funding was suddenly going away, and they were in fact hoping within the NF Clinical Trials Consortium to have this study going on to really follow patients long term to make sure what is happening when you have these long-term treatments. And so we said, okay, every day we lose is a day we will never get back. So CTF decided very quickly to invest in that trial, which is literally doing exactly what you say, Ligio, is following these long-term treatments. What happens after treatment? What happens if people are long-term on treatments? Because they modify tumors, right? So.
Okay. We have a few questions coming in now, so if everyone's okay to stay, we'll do our best to answer these. There's a question here about ketogenic diet and used in conjunction with chemotherapy for other types of brain tumors. Are any NF clinics, to anyone's knowledge, working on something like this for NF? And if not, we'll say, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I am not aware.
Yeah,
Marco,
I'm
are
also
you?
not aware of anything specific. I'm very familiar with the ketogenic diet, but I have not seen anything specific related to chemo and NF. Certainly something that I can look into, though. Now I'm curious.
Yeah, so
Marco,
there are several publications, not NF specific, but indeed there are some effects observed, and there were some publications. I saw also the conference presentation on the topic, but nothing of this was NF related. It's very interesting, but yeah, I don't know of any NF related research dedicated to do this.
Yeah.
We have two questions we're going to take. One is on clinical trials. The other one's on dedicating your donations to NF2 research. So the first one is a little more general. How does one get selected for clinical trials? Do we have to reach out, or are we notified by the clinic?
I can take that one. But then, of course, anyone else jump in. So the first step I always recommend is to talk to your NF team. If you're not currently in the care of an NF medical specialist, please reach out to us, reach out to me or to the info at CTF. We'd be happy to look into getting you connected. It's not always possible based on where you live, but we can usually find resources to get you set up with what you need. So talking to your NF team is a good place to start. If that feels like a dead end, or you're talking to your doctor and they're not sure what to tell you, there is a website that is not very user-friendly called clinicaltrials.gov. I'm sure somebody can put it in the chat for me. It is the source of truth that's funded by the government of all current clinical trials, and you can search it with keywords like diagnosis and types of tumors. But it can be very tricky to navigate and confusing. And so, again, I would recommend talking to your NF team or reaching out to us directly, and also joining the NF registry, because this is a big part of what we do, is to distill that information and make sure it gets into your hands as part of that registry.
Yeah, so we're trying to keep the world as informed as possible about all the new clinical trials that are out there. So if you feel like you don't hear about it, please call us, because that's what we're here for as well, not just for pushing the research, but also being able to be a resource for you and to ask what is new, what is going on, and then we can help you at least, and then you can talk to your clinician.
You know, I will say, I think if once you spend some time on clinicaltrials.gov, it can be a great source of information. So I just dropped the link in there. This is specific for the NF2 Intuit trial. But for example, if you were interested in any clinical trials on ketogenic diet and chemotherapy, one could put those search terms into clinicaltrials.gov. You may get 0 hits, you may get 1,000 hits, but it's a place to start. And it will also, I think there's another question about how do you get into a trial, and many trials will have inclusion or exclusion criteria. So for example, certain age ranges may be excluded, or if you're a woman of childbearing age or are pregnant, you may be excluded, but or if you've had certain kinds of treatments already, you might be excluded. But those kinds of criteria would be listed in the clinicaltrials.gov webpage.
I'm also going to type in another link as I'm talking here. It's an important page on our website, ctf.org/END-NF2. And at this page, it's a hub for all the things that CTF is funding in NF2. We keep this updated regularly. And that's actually, and I forgot to introduce her at the beginning. That's Vanessa Younger, our VP of Communications. As I was going around the panel, I missed her box. And the communications team keeps that up to date. But part two of that question also was, can one, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here, can one target or dedicate their giving to CTF to NF2? And the answer is yes. Monica, I don't know, I'm going to call on you. I don't know if you want to add something there. No, but the answer is yes. So, and you'll see it right on the page there as well. And certainly if you have any questions about that, please reach out to us and we will connect you to someone on our amazing development staff and they'll help walk you through that process. I also put a link in there a little earlier about our newsletter. Chances are you're on it if you're on this call, but we did promote this beyond just the CTF database. So if you're not on our newsletter list, please join it, ctf.org/newsletter. And as part of that process, you'll be able to let us know that you are interested in NF2 or other forms of schwannomatosis. And then we'll make sure to deliver information that's relevant for you, like this recording later this week. So anyone who's in our database, just so you know how we work, will receive this recording, whether or not they attended, just so that everyone is aware of what's happening. I'm going to promise to stay on, so I'm going to look if there are a few more questions here. It looks like I see some specific questions about Seattle. I'm just going to ask that you visit the clinical trial site or reach out to Kate about anything specific. What are the latest studies related to meningiomas? Not sure.
Well, the meningioma, there is one that may come soon, but let's please not promise that until we have it. But there is in the NF2 platform basket trial, is one of the baskets is actually meningioma. So every drug gets what they call randomized to those 4 types of tumors: vestibular schwannoma, non-vestibular schwannoma, meningioma, and ependymoma. So it's not only meningioma, it is towards the different tumor types. Within the NF Clinical Trials Consortium, there are some other NF2 trials that are ongoing, and those are funded by the congressionally directed medical research programs, and there are also multiple trials that are happening. I would have to look at the exact, I don't want to say anything stupid, so I'm happy to come back to you with which trials there are.
Okay. I think we've answered all the questions. If we've missed any, just reach out to me and I apologize and let us know and we'll get you answered. We're going to close out. I know we are over time. I'm just going to turn to Annette, maybe RB, if either of you or both of you would like to say something as we close out today for this meeting.
I'm going to hand it over to my board member.
Thanks, Annette. I hope this gives everybody a flavor that CTF is really dedicated to trying to find solutions, treatments for NF2. The best thing I can say is try to get involved, follow the website. If you have the means, donate money. There are many good ideas on those slides. At the end of the day is having enough funding to get all those good ideas into trials or into research. It's an important thing. It's why I'm involved with the CTF, because we think it's the best shot for helping Brian and all the other NF2 sufferers. I would just encourage you to get involved and try to help if you can.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Annette, were you going to say something?
No, I wanted to say thank you.
We'll
I can't make it any better after our meeting. So
I think that those are the 2 most important words. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for your support of the NF2 community. Have a wonderful day.
have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.